Hello and welcome to Tools in the Shed, a podcast powered by CarsGuide, ready to rip into car stuff that has caught our eye this week. I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James, and with me is Deputy News Editor Justin.
Hello.
And key contributor Byron.
Hello there.
Great. This week, we're looking at the electric car invasion set to storm Australian shores in the second half of this year. They're coming. We'll also discuss a trio of recent entries to the CarsGuide garage, then dive into your thoughts on last week's episode. And it's time to announce the next step in our podcast journey. From next week, look out for the, wait for it, CarsGuide Podcast. That's spelt P-O-D-C-A-R-S-T. We're still tools. That'll never change, quite obviously. But the aim is to make it easier to find us, and hence the frankly brilliant adoption of our brand ID for that. So look out for CarsGuide Podcast. YouTubers, you can jump ahead courtesy of the time codes in the notes below, and you can click on the chapter markers in the timeline. So let's go. And the electric car invasion, they're coming thick and fast now. Despite the lack of government incentives, a wave of new battery electric vehicles, call them BEVs or EVs, is building for the second half of this year. EV infrastructure is actually growing. And this year we've already seen the Hyundai Kona Electric, Kia e-Niro, Mini Cooper SE and Nissan Leaf E Plus joining existing models from Audi, BMW, Hyundai, Jaguar, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, Porsche, and of course, Tesla. There are another 10 big arrivals for the second half of this year, two of which we'll look at in a bit of depth because these two blokes have just driven them and the reviews went up on carsguide.com.au yesterday. We'll give you the details on the others coming down the pipeline from affordable to ultra premium. So, Byron, can I kick it off with you, please? You have just experienced the Mazda MX-30 electric, Mazda's first mass production electric vehicle. Can you fill us in on the car and your impressions, please?
Indeed, I can. Thank you, James. I can't recall possibly a car that's come with more baggage before its launch than this particular car. And as you said, it's Mazda's first electric vehicle and definitely not its last because pretty much accompanying this car's imminent arrival a few weeks ago was Mazda's announcement that it is going like hell for leather down the electrification path. This is the first of many electric vehicles or electrified vehicles, and it's certainly probably, as I said, the most controversial. Just in case you've been living under a rock or in a cave or whatnot, there are some people
as Justin does.
As Justin does, that's right.
Yeah.
Some people are just going ew to the MX-30E's range, which is a frankly not very impressive 200 kilometers on the WLTP.
I was going to ask Byron, does it have range? Thought it was more of an installation than an actual car.
The other thing is its pricing. It's $65,490 before on-road costs, which puts it bang into the territory accompanied by cars that offer almost or probably beyond double that range. Like we're talking almost 480 or 90 kilometres.
Is the range thing, though, Byron, a conscious decision? Well, obviously it's a conscious decision, but, a move by Mazda to say this is going to be exclusively a city vehicle and it's not going to do more than 200 kilometres would cover. Mm. And so therefore we can make it a bit lighter. We can make it a little better to drive. We're just going to be very focused in terms of this car's purpose.
Correct, James. So, whether you think it's, it's drinking the Kool-Aid, the Mazda Kool-Aid.
Yeah, which is rather tasty. I mean, yeah.
Well, that's just it. Look, it's easy to be cynical about this car, isn't it, Justin? Because the facts are there. It doesn't. You just can't drive that as far on a single charge, than you can with, say, the almost identically priced and positioned Kona electric EV by Hyundai. But Mazda's argument is that, this car, it's easier on the planet as a result of having a much smaller battery that is quicker to charge, that results in a vehicle that weighs hundreds of kilograms less than, say, a Mercedes EQA, but still is great to drive, has high quality, and will presumably be reliable and dependable as Mazdas are or have a reputation for being. Now, I went into this. I went to the launch and drove this car with a view that, gee, it's really got one arm tied behind its back. But driving it, I realized that from a packaging point of view, what Mazda has done is that they've looked at the BMW i3 and thought, well, we can probably create a take on this car that will have limited appeal, but will do what it's designed to do properly. So, yes, as you said, it's aimed at kind of metro and urban owners who do commutes that aren't required, to take 200 kilometres to complete.
That's right. If you're doing 40 kilometres a round trip a day as a city commute, 200 is overkill.
Yeah, exactly. And but it's clothed in a body which I think looks great in real life. The interior is lovely, and from a drivability point of view, it drives the way you expect a properly sorted out Mazda to drive. So it feels good. But the thing that I like most is that it's refined and it's quiet, not just from an electrification point of view, but in terms of the material use, the interesting textures that the car has, which are, I think, an ode to the i3 as well, because it uses cork and that sort of thing, and the Maztex vinyl trim is.
I'm worried about the herds of wild Maztexes that are being plundered for all of that trim material.
Yeah, and then I thought, well, if you're going to be driving around in an urban environment in a car that kind of locks the world outside in its kind of cocooned comfort and opulence, and that's not such a bad thing. And look, I had a Nissan Leaf, a first generation Nissan Leaf, for a few years, several years ago, when there was virtually no infrastructure here in Melbourne for electric vehicles, and that car barely managed 100 kilometres of range, which is less than half of what this does. And my partner would drive it across the city, 30 or 40 kilometres away, to and from where he worked, and it was fine. It was fine to go a couple of days without charging it, or you could charge it at university, or you could charge it back home, and you learn to live with that, and it just wasn't an issue. And yes, the biggest problem with this car is that it can't do those long trips. So you would probably need to either have a second car, or Mazda should provide some sort of subscription service where if you want to go on a long trip, if you want to go to the Alpine region or down the coast or that sort of thing, maybe you should be able to have an MX-30 with access to a CX-30 or an CX-5 or an MX-5 for that matter. I think that's the solution that Mazda should investigate. But overall, I found it quite a compelling and enjoyable EV experience. And, it's got a few flaws, such as it's difficult to see out of when you're driving it around town. So that kind of compromises its urban kind of focus. Those freestyle doors that open, the rear hinged forward opening rear doors, can be a little bit of a pain, but then you're not really buying this car as a family car, although there is enough space in the back as a family car. It's just not, it's not very roomy.
Justin, you have an opinion?
Let's just say that the rear seat in the MX-30 is compromised, to say the least. So I was just wondering what kind of family would fit in that.
And not only with those doors are they awkward when you're in a park next to another car, you can't wind the rear windows down. So that whole sense of claustrophobia, because the B pillars are super thick, because they're strengthened up from a safety point of view, and you can't wind the windows down. Ooh, I don't know.
You have to open the front door to open the rear doors as well. So
that's a pain.
You're completely all in when it comes to
irrespective
using any
of the
side
power.
of the car.
That's it. Irrespective of the powertrain, I think it's Mazda just saying, hey, BMW, we had these doors before you, and we're going to do them again. And
Or is Mazda saying, hey, world, hey, Toyota FG Cruiser drivers, are you looking for an electric vehicle where, you get similarly bad packaging, but it's something that you can feel fun and, you can feel good about driving? Well, here's your car. That's what I think.
That's good. Look, in the interests of time, we thank you, Byron. We better move on. And Justin, you've been in a very similar situation in that you've driven a fresh electric vehicle. It's kind of similar size, really, but slightly different positioning and all of that. Fill us in, please.
Yeah, unlike the MX-30 electric, this is probably not as ill-conceived, so that's good.
You will keep, mister. You will keep.
Break out the burn kit.
Yes. Never going to stop. Yes, JC, I had the pleasure of driving the Mercedes-Benz EQA recently. For those who don't know, the EQA is based on the GLA, so it's a small SUV. It's based on the same platform, in fact. So out goes the petrol the petrol or diesel engine and replaced with an electric powertrain. So I drove the EQA 250, which is the entry-level variant. It's a single electric motor. There is an all-wheel drive option called the 350 coming later this year. Look, being based on an internal combustion engine platform, that obviously, much like the MX-30, some compromises around packaging. So compared to a GLA, the boot's about 100 litres smaller, so that's not as good. The rear bench positioning is quite high because of the battery being on the floor. So it's a bit of an awkward squatting position for those in the rear. So that isn't so good as well, but that's pretty much where the negatives kind of end for it. Really, it's quite a compelling car to drive. It's relatively comfortable, not amazing, but comfortable enough around the city and in the country. But I suppose price is an interesting one. So again, compared to the MX-30 electric, it's about $10,000 more expensive. The range is 420 Ks, so more than double what you get out of an MX-30, which in itself is probably worth 10 grand, but you're getting a Mercedes badge as well. Sorry, I can't help myself.
I hope I get to write a reply here, Justin.
maybe later, but let me continue first. So look, in terms of positioning, compared to mainstream competitors like potentially an MX-30 or a Kona electric, you're spending $10,000 more and getting that Mercedes badge. Arguably, when you compare it to a Kona, though, you are getting less standard equipment. And I suppose with the MX-30 as well. But there's just something to keep in mind there. But in terms of its own competitive set in the premium segment, the Volvo XC40 is within $200 of the EQA 250. It's about $77,000. But the Volvo XC40 Recharge Pure Electric, to use its full name, has far higher outputs, 300 kilowatts, 660 newton meters, whereas this EQA 250 is 140 kilowatts and 375 newton meters. So for the same money, that Volvo is far and away better value. It's all-wheel drive, so dual motor powertrain as standard. So they're not really apples for apples in that regard. So I guess you can actually probably say that the EQA 250 is relatively expensive. That's certainly my view. So that's, I guess, a mark against it as well. But aside from that, one thing in particular that I really like about the EQA 250 is the regenerative braking. I think Mercedes has done an amazing job in terms of giving owners the option of what they want to get out of the brake pedal, essentially. So there's 5 modes, believe it or not, for it. But they're more regular modes. There's a D mode, which as soon as you lift off the accelerator, you get a bit of motor braking, the same way you would in any sort of like petrol or diesel car with engine braking. But then if you really want to tap into that regenerative braking, then there's a mode called D- or D-, which progressively increase the aggressiveness of the regen.
Sounds like my maths results there. Thank you.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound good, does it?
Doesn't 2 negatives make it negate?
Make a positive. Yeah, 2 negatives make a positive. So let's call it D+ in that case, in which case your maths results are getting better, Jason.
That'd be a great result.
Keep working hard.
Yeah.
But no, let's call it D+. D+ is my favorite because basically it enables one pedal driving, which is something the Nissan Leaf does brilliantly. But basically you can get around town without ever having to touch the brake pedal, without ever actually having to use the friction brakes. And it's great. That is the full.
The MX-30 has that too, by the way.
5 as well, isn't it? 5 modes?
The MX-30 has 5 modes as well.
Yeah.
If you're not going to mention them, Byron, then they don't exist.
Yeah.
Just because you're a better reviewer than me, stop showing off.
Do you know what's interesting? I think back to the first A-Class, the Moose test failing A-Class, and how it was already prepped for a battery. You know, that way back then, Mercedes-Benz was always thinking, this could become electrified. It's a really long horizon for Mercedes-Benz all the time. So that A-Class, this car that you've just been driving, has been coming for some time.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, the EQA was originally meant to be a hatchback, and only later in life they decided that, hey, rather than basing on the A-Class, let's do the GLA instead. Obviously, they're related, so they weren't too far apart. But obviously, as trends have changed and small SUVs are on the rise, hatchbacks on the way out, they made the logical decision, you know what, EQA shouldn't be a hatchback. Let's do small SUV instead. And that's ultimately going to be a wise decision, I would say.
Yeah.
But just to finish on the regenerative braking, D+, the one thing it doesn't do is it will bring you to a crawl, not a complete stop, whereas something like a Nissan Leaf will actually bring you to a complete stop. So it's not true one-pedal driving, but it's damn close. But anyway, my point is, if you owned it and you didn't want to drive it like an electric car, you can drive it like a petrol car. The option's there. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, in terms of performance, I personally would be hanging for the 350, that dual motor one. It's got 210 kilowatts of power, 215 kilowatts of power and 520 newton meters of torque. It's going to be much sprightlier. The EQA 250 is not too quick. Around the city, though, off the line, obviously, you got that instant torque. So again, if you were a primarily urban driver, then you're going to be quite pleased with the types of cars that you can beat off the line. But ultimately, they're going to catch and exceed you because it doesn't get much faster after you hit 60 Ks, but an EQA 350 would certainly have a bit more punch if that's your type of thing. But look, as an overall car, definitely some compromises to it, being not a dedicated EV platform or anything like that. But still, I think they're going to find quite a few buyers with it because it's fairly compelling.
I think it's hilarious that you say that, the boot space is, or the cargo capacity is reduced compared to that bastion of boot space, the GLA, that it's based on.
Well, the GLA has standards about 445 litres or thereabouts, and this is 340. So 340
which is actually more than the
MX,
which is actually more than MX-30s.
Yeah.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I went without saying. I didn't have to say it, but thank you for bringing it up. But yes, it is more than an MX-30.
And what's the ride quality like on that EQA?
The ride quality, I don't think it's horrible. If you go for the AMG line, you get the 20-inch wheels and they spoil it a little bit, but I don't think it's too bad. It's fairly comfortable. Obviously, on coarse chip surfaces, it's not great. And that car is worth mentioning that it weighs 2,040 kilos, which is about the same as a Kluger hybrid does, believe it or not.
Wow.
And it's, I think, Byron, MX-30, you can tell me.
Or an MX-30 and a.
Well, I was going to say the MX-30 is like 400 kilos lighter thereabouts, right?
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, so it's a porker, not a Porsche. A porker. So that's not particularly good. That means it's obviously a little stiffly sprung as well. So yeah, the ride could be better, but I think on the whole, it's relatively comfortable.
So is it a corker for a porker?
So, well, I would have thought the MX-30 would be a corker given the inclusion of cork inside.
Yeah. All right. Now, that's good. That's good. Justin, Byron, thank you for those rapid reviews. Speaking of rapid, I think what we'll do with the wave that's starting to break on Australian shores, let's kind of rattle through them and just see what we think, possible success, possible not, which way do we see it going? Let's kick it off with BMW. They've got a couple, iX3 and iX. Byron, what do you think?
The iX3, which is an intriguing car for a couple of reasons. It'll be, I think, BMW's first car made in China that is going on sale. It also seems to be really well packaged, right-sized vehicle. And X3 is one of those SUVs that's been getting better with, I think, with as it's getting older.
460 kilometre range.
Yeah. So I think that would be kind of BMW's atonement, I guess, for the compromises at the i3, which I love the i3, by the way. Don't get me wrong.
So do I.
The atonement in terms of just it being a more mainstream and practical vehicle.
Okay. We've got to keep going, Justin.
Yep.
iX3 is going to be a hot seller, but the thing I'm personally looking forward to, maybe not hot seller, let me call that off, but the thing that I'm looking forward to,
settle down, boy,
or is the
Hold
iX,
on, Tiger.
because the iX is the first true example of BMW's next generation of electric vehicles. It's got all the new stuff, all the new battery technology, electric motors, all that kind of stuff. iX3, yeah, whatever, but it's the iX that's the real interesting one. It's obviously got quite divisive styling as well.
Love the styling.
I love the fact that it's so hateable. And BMW's done that a lot recently with 4 Series and what have you. So I think that in itself is a statement, obviously, but I'm very excited to drive it and see what that next generation's like. The interior is completely different, completely new multimedia. Like, it is a properly next generation car.
It's like the freshest BMW in the world with an Edsel grille, with a Ford Edsel grille.
It seems as though BMW sees its role to once in a generation just outrage public sensibilities with some kind of styling / design outrage.
Absolutely.
And, I remember when people were picketing the 4-cylinder building in Munich because Chris Bangle had done a new 7 Series and 5 Series and they thought the brand was going down the toilet. Yes. So anyway, look, that's kind of part of their cyclical history. Now, next, Hyundai Ioniq 5. I think that's going to have some success in this market, but am I alone? What do you guys reckon?
I think it's shaping up as maybe Tesla will have a thing to say about this, but I think there's a good chance it could be the best-selling electric car in Australia at some point. Right. Non-Tesla, perhaps, but it's got all the right ingredients. It's a Hyundai, it's a mid-size SUV, if you want to call it that. It's really a high-riding hatchback that's on the larger side, but again, speaking of like next generation electric cars, this is on a dedicated platform, which I know I was mentioning earlier, the lack thereof on many of electric cars, but this is a dedicated platform. So there are going to be very few compromises in terms of packaging and what have you. So I'm very excited for Ioniq 5, and I think it's got the potential to do big things.
Yeah, Byron? I think it combines everything that's good in EVs in a package that's really good. My only issue with that car is that Hyundai should have called it the Pony.
That's a nice idea.
Because it harks back to the original bespoke Hyundai design vehicle from the mid-70s that we never saw in Australia called the Pony.
My first visit to the Ulsan plant, ponies were still being built. There you go. That's how old I am. I think it's possibly the best-looking car, irrespective of what powers it, to have been put out there this year. I think it's
I'm glad
amazing.
you brought that up. It's got that retro chic style, and it goes back to the Pony, in fact, and the 45 concept, which it's based on, which again was referencing the Pony and all that kind of stuff. So it's retro and cool.
I think it's a real trendsetter, and you'll see elements of that car will influence others. It's really, really a groundbreaker.
I reckon we should petition Hyundai and all our viewers and readers. Let's call it the Pony.
You're right. I think.
Might be.
I reckon that's got about as much hope as my campaign to get people swapping to the other side of the road, which I've been running, personally, occasionally, just to encourage it, so we can get the models that we're not getting at the moment.
Our new series of preposterous ideas.
Yeah. Now, not a preposterous idea is the Volvo that we were talking about just a little while ago, the XC40 Recharge Pure Electric, third quarter of this year, so not too far away. Volvo is really hitting some pretty good goals with its electric cars. What do we think about this one?
I reckon it's the second best looking EV that's coming, because I love the look and the proportion and and just the quality and the Volvo-ness, the sheer Volvo-ness of this car. And
Justin, you called it too. It's powerful. It has got so much grunt.
Price point they've been able to bring it in at, compared again to an EQA 250 or a Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus or a Kona Electric, all within $10,000-$12,000 of the Volvo. It's insane. Like, it is a properly powerful car, under 5 seconds to 100, and on the road you're going to get it for just over 80 grand without options. And I think what you're getting for that amount of money is pretty staggering. So they've done a pretty damn good job, I would have thought, with the price.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how much Volvo can support it in terms of, publicising the thing, marketing it. When you're up against the likes of Mazda and Mercedes-Benz, Volvo's been doing much better in terms of sales in Australia in recent years, but they're not in the same kind of scale as those, but it could be the making of them, you know. Now, Audi e-tron, there's a name that already is well known, but we've got two pretty exciting cars coming in the second half of this year. The e-tron S is, as the name implies, a sportier version of the e-tron that we're already familiar with. And then we've got the e-tron GT, which, talk about stunning looks. That's a really aggressive, macho-looking GT-style car. So we're told second half for e-tron S and third quarter, more specifically, for e-tron GT. Both of those sound pretty exciting, but the e-tron GT looks amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say the e-tron S certainly doesn't excite me as much as the e-tron GT. I mean, the e-tron S has got a tri-motor powertrain, so that'll be interesting. Torque vectoring on the rear axle, all that kind of stuff. So that will be fun to drive, I'm sure. But yeah, e-tron GT, for those of you that don't know, is basically the twin to the Porsche Taycan. So again, dedicated platform for EVs. The Taycan, in my opinion, is the best electric car I've ever driven. So the e-tron GT, by default, should be pretty bloody good.
Yeah. And you know, it's slightly more comfort and user orientated compared to the Porsche, slightly. But it also has its own style. I think it's does it ever? And there's also in the wings is an RS GT, which I presume, Justin, would be the equivalent of a Turbo S Taycan.
Turbo, actually, would you believe it? So
Turbo.
Porsche's obviously gone to the negotiating room and made sure that they could protect Turbo S. But RS is more or less on the same level as Turbo. The Taycan and e-tron GT's variants have slightly different outputs. But they're more or less line balls. So RS is the equivalent to Turbo. I think what I would say, having driven the Turbo and Turbo S Taycan, is you really can't tell the difference between the Turbo and the Turbo S. Like that RS version of the e-tron GT will be stunning, I'm sure.
I've been pronouncing it wrong. Taycan.
Yeah. In the Ferdinand Piëch era, the negotiating room at VW Group was padded, and there were various weapons in there. I think it did come to serious blows during that time. That's good. Then Lexus UX 300E, we're told November. And it's not quite in the same performance ballpark, but it's Lexus getting into the whole EV thing.
Yeah, that's interesting because it will be the first electrified TNGA platform vehicle. So it will give us a taste of what we can expect from Toyotas, albeit in a much more salubrious and expensive package compared to what the Toyotas might be. But I'm looking forward to that. What do you reckon, Justin?
What I would say in particular that I'm kind of interested in, and that goes to a point you made earlier, Byron, about the DRS MX-30, was Lexus. No, I can't.
It's a concerted campaign.
It is. It's a smear campaign. The UX 300E, though, it's got decent range. I think from memory, it's about 340 Ks thereabouts.
I think we're saying it's a bit more than that.
Oh, sorry, is it close to 400?
Yeah.
Either way. Okay, so that's double what you get with an MX-30. But even so, Lexus have their Encore Platinum program, whatever, that will probably come with this car as standard, meaning that if you did want to drive to Brisbane, in fact, you could just go and get an RX or whatever as part of that membership and not drive your UX there. So I know, Byron, you were mentioning earlier that those city-based people that might want to go for a drive should potentially have a subscription or option to drive something else. That's what you're going to get with the UX.
Yeah,
so you're going to have a bit of versatility there, which is interesting and not really something that anyone else is doing at the moment in Australia.
And we all love versatility.
A bit of versatility.
Oh, I totally love it. I live for versatility. Now, then we are at the upper end of the spectrum. We've been talking about EQA, EQS, which will be arriving in December. Talk about a niche car, but impressive, no doubt about it. 107.8 kilowatt hour battery, 770 kilometre range, immense performance. It's going to be quite a thing.
And quite beautiful from some angles too.
It's striking, yeah.
To me, it elevates the S-Class to the position where the car historically has been progressive, dynamic, and really just breaking through barriers in order to bring something new to the party. Love it.
Yeah, no, I talked earlier about like next generation of EVs with iX and Ioniq 5. But for me, the EQS is the next generation of EVs. You're talking like super long range, 770 Ks.
Also, to your point, Byron, in terms of moving the game on, when I was pulling a few inches together of the car, you look at that dash. It's incredible. It's this big, oddly shaped digital piece,
Hyperscreen, they call it.
Oh, it's a hyperscreen. Yeah, that's not a bad term for it, really. It is amazing.
Yeah. I can imagine, it's going to be the next gangster video cliche, because it just has that cut through.
Yes.
In fact, maybe Madonna behind me in her 280 Cabriolet, and when she revives her career as a novagenarian, will probably be driving around in one of those.
Yeah. She has eyebrows now, which is amazing. And now you touched on it before. This is the Polestar. The brand is going to be arriving in Australia, so it's late in the year, November. With this particular thing, it's a sedan body, but Polestar 2, dynamics, luxury, 440 kilometres of range, the whole bit. Talk about great-looking cars. This one is a winner for me too, in terms of the way it looks. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's an interesting design, the Polestar 2, because it's a hatchback, it's a sedan, it's an SUV, it's kind of everything. So in terms of making a statement, I think it certainly will, because a lot of people just look at it and go, what is that? Like, what is it? So it's interesting. But essentially, again, it's a mechanical relative to the XC40, the Recharge pure electric. So you're going to top out with that same 300 kilowatt, 660 newton meter dual motor powertrain. There are other lesser powertrain options, but I'm not sure yet if what we're actually see in Australia. But either way, it could catch a few people by surprise, I think.
Yep. I think it's interesting to look at the evolution of Polestar. It was a modifier or an enhancer of Volvos and running all the motorsport stuff. And now they're a kind of pure electric car company, standalone brand, all of that. It's been quite dramatic and quite rapid in terms of the way that business has changed.
Well, they saw the writing on the wall, didn't they? And they thought, well, if we can't quite hit the M and AMG levels, and let's pioneer or be great in another era. And it'll do full circle, because electrification lends itself to rapid performance and great dynamics just by pure design and physics and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's more than an emerging brand. I think it's going to be the Tesla, Sweden's Tesla, isn't it?
There you go. All right. Well, look, that's the wave. That's the electric car wave. We're paddling into it. We'll be in the green room shortly when they all start arriving. And thank you for that, guys. We will now move on to our very own garage and touch on cars that we've been driving. Justin, you made it clear off air before we started the show that you had a couple of points to make about this vehicle. Please put them on the table and tell us what you've been driving.
Thank you. I've only been in this car for 48 hours, but I already have some fairly strong opinions. I picked up a base Hyundai Tucson with the 2-liter Atmo, or the MPI. And it's a pretty good car overall, but I think there are a couple of things that deserve to be called out. But the first thing I noticed getting in it was how large has the Tucson's become. Like, it is genuinely on the large side of mid-size now. It just feels big, which is great because there's so much space in the boot, in the second row. Like, it's a very spacious vehicle. And obviously with the new design language it has as well, it makes quite a statement on the road. For those of you that haven't seen it, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it now. But it is definitely out there. But I think it looks great for that. And the interior itself, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I don't quite like the design of the center stack with the touchscreen and the whole black panel with the touch capacitive buttons or whatever. I think it's going to age really quickly. I already don't like it, just the look of it. So I'm not sure how that's going to stick around in the long term. But the two things I wanted to mention was this base car has halogen headlights in 2021.
Interesting. You're channeling Matt Campbell.
I was about to bring up
Matt
Campbell. He's the LED
headlight vulture. He's on to you if you don't have the LED headlights. Yeah,
indeed. And I want to join that train.
You're on the branch next to him.
I'm on the branch. But yeah, no, LED headlights should absolutely be standard in any car from 2021 that's new, purely from a safety perspective. I mean, you're rolling around at night with halogens. It's effectively like holding up a candle and hoping that you're going to have full visibility. You're just not going to.
Do you know what my theory is,
shocking.
Justin? My theory is that they're actually cheaper to manufacture and install than traditional halogens, but whilst ever you can charge a premium, do it. And I reckon the same's true for screens rather than traditional, analog mechanical gauges. Yes. And it was very much true when Windows moved from manual cranks to electric motors. It was way cheaper to make and install electric motors, yet you could charge a premium there for a while.
You're 100% right as far as I'm concerned. They are making a point. And Hyundai is not the only brand that does it. But certainly the Koreans, that's Kia included, are famous for doing it. But they are making a point of saying, okay, you bought the base car, you're getting halogens. You want LEDs? Oh, you're going to have to go much further up the range to get that. And I think it's a ridiculous point to make. Like you said, when it comes to R&D, it's much more expensive to come up with two different headlight solutions than it is just to have one the whole way through, or whatever, a variation of LED. But either way, I think it's stupid and it's wrong. That's the case. You need LED headlights. Plus, the DRLs are already LED and they look fantastic. But then you've got the headlights positioned lower on the bumper and they're halogen and they just look crap.
Got it.
Anyway, that's my halogen rant. My second thing I wanted to say as well, something that I think should be standard. This base Tucson's got things like a wireless smartphone charger as standard, which is a great inclusion for 2021 onwards. But what it doesn't have is keyless entry and start. It's key in the barrel. You've got to use the key fob to open the door. Again, for a car that costs as much as it does, I think you got to be doing it keyless the whole way through. It's convenient. It's not a safety thing, sure, but it's convenience. And I don't know, it's just annoying to pull a key out of your pocket these days.
It's a first world automotive problem.
It is. I completely acknowledge that. But in Australia, we have a much higher specification of cars, generally speaking. And obviously we go through personally so many different cars over the course of weeks, months, years, whatever. And very rarely these days do you find yourself having to pull the key out of your pocket. So yeah, it's pretty disappointing when you do, particularly on a mid-size SUV that costs 30 plus grand. You would have thought that somehow you would be able to include something like that when you've already got things like full safety, wireless smartphone charger, etc.
Right. So thank you, Justin. Tucson, done and dusted. Byron, you have been in a significant car in world terms, and it has been for many decades. The latest iteration of it is here. Please give us your thoughts.
That's right, James. I've been in the base model automatic Golf 8, simply known as the Golf 1110 TSI. It doesn't really look that different to the old car. However, when you line them back to back, you can certainly see, or side by side, you can certainly see the changes.
It looks a bit more sinister around the headlights, doesn't it? It's got that kind of hooded look to it.
Yeah, droopy and sinister is good. To me, it looks like an Angry Bird, a bit like the old One Series. So I personally don't think it has the purity of line as the Mark 7. This is a car for me that lives in the shadow of one of the great cars of the 2010s, because the Mark 7 was a bit of a game changer when it was released globally in late 2012. It was so far ahead of the competition. It just laid down the law. It just threw down the gauntlet and all those other cliches. And you can't expect that huge level of jump again generationally, because the Golf 7 as a 7.5 still ended up near the top of its class. There are so many things to like about this Golf, particularly its switch to, in the lower range versions anyway, the 1.4 turbo carries over, but it is now paired to an 8-speed torque converter auto supplied by Aisin, Toyota-owned Aisin. And, that I think is a reassurance for many people who are a bit wary of the patchy reliability record of dual clutch transmission. So that, for many people, is a reason to just go from a 7 or to an 8, because it has a new transmission. I think by and large it's a great thing because it's a proven gearbox and it drives fairly well. My only thing is that my fuel consumption figures aren't as good as I've recorded with Golfs with this engine in the past.
Right.
I was averaging around 10 litres per 100 kilometres. A lot of it was urban driving because it is an urban review. And that's probably a little bit on the thirsty side, I thought, particularly as it does run on premium unleaded fuel. My other issue is the interior, to me, seems a bit too stripped out and too Spartan for a Golf, particularly at its $31,950 plus on-road price point. You don't get satellite navigation. You don't get digital radio. There's no rear armrest with a cup holder for the back seat. And that's a little bit disappointing. It doesn't feel as expensive or as opulent or as premium as Golfs used to. I feel that it's been a little bit maybe decontented in that way, and that's disappointing. However, the car's chassis fluidity, the way it handles, the way it drives at speed, it's right up there. It feels light yet planted to the road, and it talks to you, and it's an invigorating drive in the way that the Peugeot 308 is, and the way the Ford Focus is. So I love that. That alone is enough to get me over the line. And also, just one other thing, I like the fact that it's got deep windows and the interior is glassy and airy and feels spacious. And overall, I think it's definitely worth checking out. But you might be disappointed in a couple of those areas that Golfs are famous for.
Just to your point about the transmission, Byron, ironically, Australia gets this 8-speed ACE and torque converter because of our poor fuel quality, precluding us from getting the 1.5-litre 4-cylinder with the 7-speed dual clutch transmission that's available in Europe and elsewhere. So we don't get that because of our poor fuel quality. But then obviously the downside of that is, like you found, is that the fuel consumption is now higher with the 8-speed, because certainly in other cars that are available in Australia with that 1.5 and 7-speed gearbox, and not just in Volkswagens, but also Skodas as well, the fuel economy in those cars is exceptional. So there's obviously been a bit of a trade-off.
Yeah, I think Tom White called that out after he drove the car, that it's almost like a window that this will close reasonably soon as Australia's fuel quality might improve. That configuration may not be necessary.
That's right. A correction, I think I said a 1.4, but it is 1.5.
Right.
No, the one you've got is a 1.4.
It is 1.4.
Yeah, it's the old engine, because we can't have the 1.5, which is the new engine.
Right. Yeah. So retract that.
Cool. Sorry. I was just going to say, before we move on to the car I've been driving, Justin, just quickly, we touched on Byron's background. Tell us about the car behind you, please.
Oh, yeah. The car behind me is, for those that don't know, the Aston Martin DBS that was famously crashed in Casino Royale with Daniel Craig in 2006 from memory. But at the time, it set the Guinness World Record for the number of rotations in a crash. I think off the top of my head, it was like 11 or something. But this is the car post-crash, obviously, so it's lost a wheel and seen better days, but remarkably in good condition for a car that rolled 11 times. And famously, of course, Bond was okay. So I'm sure this car is somewhere in Aston's collection. If not, the studio will own it.
Tell you what, though, it shows the structural integrity of that VH platform that came, that was developed, I would say, in the early 2000s.
Absolutely.
Yonks ago. So,
The cynic in me, though, would probably say they'd reinforced it somehow for the scene. But if they want to claim a Guinness World Record, I guess they would have just used the production car. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, there was some cheeky panel beating after the scene.
Yeah, don't you think Justin has a bit of Daniel Craig? Yes. Look at him with his Aston.
If I could be Bond, I would.
Cool. Let's move on. I can finish things up on this segment with a Subaru XV Hybrid. It's the Hybrid S, 2-litre 4-cylinder, 110 kilowatts, 196 newton meters, and then a 12.3 kilowatt, 66 newton meter AC electric motor with a CVT, all-wheel drive, just under $41,000 before you put it on the road. And the things you can say about this car, the safety, the standard safety is great, even reverse AEB. You've also got self-leveling LED headlights, leather, etc. I think the exterior looks pretty sharp. I wasn't in love with the colour of the one that I was driving, but anyway. There have been some tweaks to the CVT. which do improve things a bit. More space than you'd think in the back. I was sitting in the back of the car going, this is quite amazing. It steers nicely and it's surprisingly refined. On the negative side of the ledger, I found Subaru's insistence with multiple screen setups in the center stack up to the base of the windscreen. I think it looks disjointed. It's not very good from an ergonomic point of view. It dates the dash design quite badly. And as we've documented with the original model and this more recent one, the fuel economy doesn't really add up in terms of a hybrid, the extra, premium that you have to pay to get the hybrid. You're still looking at about 8 litres per 100. It's a little reluctant from step off, and I still think the CVT is a bit ordinary. So it's not exactly it's not bad, but it's not the kind of rapid, nippy performance that you would like in a car of this type. So there it is.
As far as hybrids go, though, it's really not a Toyota hybrid or anywhere near the same level as. No. The only time you're ever going to really be driving electric in one of those is when you're in reverse, I'm pretty sure.
I think so. It's ultra slow speed, I think, when it will go on. And that's crawling. Probably, when you're in reverse. There are different modes where, motor and engine are interacting. But, sure. That's true. That's true. All right, now let us continue to move on, and it's the feedback section where we're listening to your thoughts. And last week, Richard and Co. touched on some more detail or Aussie details for the Land Cruiser 300, which has been such a big buzz during the last couple of weeks. And Diploma Mill Doc said, don't be part of the experiment. And Ian Thomas agreed. I'm sure other people had the same thought. Wait a year or two for the problems to surface. Buy after others have been the guinea pigs. So that's one point of view, I suppose. And you could say that about any new car or any new generation car, that there will inevitably be some bugs and maybe you wait and see. Glenn Jacobs had the alternate position. He said, had my LC200 for 2 years, about 70% hard dirt Ks from Cape York, Outback to Tasmania. Inline and ordered the 300, can't wait to do the same dirt Ks with it. Most buyers won't use it off-road really, but that doesn't change the significance of its cultural off-road language. Brilliant phrase. There'll be bugs to sort out because it's a new model. I'd rather have fun sorting those bugs out in the water, air and technical dirt than sitting around waiting for a few years, waiting for it to be okay. Where do you guys sit on that, on the two sides of those scales? Are you a wait and see or are you a dive in?
Yeah, I think it's like you said, with the technology in general, be it computers, phones, cars, whatever, you're always going to have your early adopters. And typically when it comes to tech, I probably find myself being an early adopter. But certainly when it comes to cars, obviously, LC300, you're talking about a new engine, new platform, all that kind of stuff. The 200 is tried and true. People know what they're getting themselves into. 300 is always going to be a bit of a mystery until you actually get your feet wet. So, I don't have any strong thoughts personally, but it's untried, I guess.
Warren, you've bought some cars sometime after they were launched. Are you a wait and see person?
Definitely not. I kind of agree with Justin that I tend to dive right in. As I said earlier, I was a fairly early adopter for electric vehicles. But I think in the case of the Land Cruiser, those things are so expensive to begin with now. I think people with a lot of money or disposable income or that sort of thing can probably afford to take a chance and also probably expect technology.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget, in the first 5 years, you are going to have warranty. So most issues you would assume, hopefully, are going to happen much later in life. But if something were to happen in the short term, you're going to have coverage unless you've done something really stupid.
Well, if Toyota was really smart, they'd do an Elon and just charge people ahead of time for stuff that they haven't supplied yet and make that part of the warranty process as well.
Who's Elon?
Oh, yeah, some dude. Now, Hammer Rocks, there was also chat about the potential for a hybrid, LC300. Hammer Rock said that in his opinion, there were just two big issues with that. GVM, and Joe King, great name as always, Joe King agreed, and water, as in waiting. Batteries and water, not typically happy bedfellows. and how much weight is left for payload before reaching GVM when you've got these heavy batteries and things. So I suppose they're very valid concerns. You'd want to have the 100% waterproofing around those lithiums, the wires, cables, venting ducts. If you're going to be wading in 700 millimeters of water, what does that mean? Is that too simplistic a response or genuine kind of a concern? What do you reckon, Justin?
I think the concern is genuine there, but I would point to the Jeep Wrangler plug-in hybrid as an example.
Yeah.
That's obviously something that we've seen recently. It still has the off-road credentials you expect of a Wrangler, but obviously they've gone to lengths to make sure that certain things aren't compromised. So if there's anyone out there that's concerned about that, then I would go and compare the PHEV Wrangler to an ICE Wrangler and see the difference or perhaps lack thereof. And then for what it's worth, the Wrangler PHEV in the States has been selling ridiculously, apparently. So, there seems to be no sort of apprehension over there for those particular buyers. But on the topic of the LC300 hybrid, or the possibility of one, just a bit of a tease. On the weekend, we're publishing a story from Mr. 300, Andrew Chesterton, on the topic. Yeah. So look forward to that one.
Interesting. All right. Now, the other feedback we had was about an idea that Richard had last week when we were talking about ANCAP stars and how there's a lag in that a car that's been assessed against criteria from ANCAP that's, say, 2016, maybe even earlier, still stands up as 5 stars today, even though the criteria to gain 5 stars for a new car has stepped up considerably. So his idea was to add a star each year. If you meet the criteria, you're no longer 5-star, you're 6-star. And on it goes for as long as the car exists. Senior Bob thought this was a great idea as well. And Jim Danek says, look, maybe the alternative could be to take a star away each year that you don't meet the criteria. So nobody's going to want a minus 5-star rated car. I think, all jokes aside, I think there is a lag and ANCAP's aware of it. But it's not exactly ideal when you're not comparing apples with apples in this regard. Do you have an opinion on this, Byron?
Yeah, I do. Putting some thought to it, like a whole 20 seconds, it occurred to me that maybe rather than go a whole star, maybe just go like 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 stars.
Right.
And that way, so, a competitor model will have a goal to get that extra 0.1 of a star to top it. And that gives bragging rights, but that can also work in reverse. So each year, maybe each car should go back 0.1 if it doesn't adopt things.
Yeah.
So that way, it gives you it gives scope for models that have still got some life to improve, and also it punishes complacency. So
yeah,
I think.
It kind of goes to the nature of what an ANCAP assessment is, because I think, conceptually, most people see a car slamming into a barrier and it's a crash test, but it is also an assessment of the car's active safety features, all of those crash avoidance features, as well as those passive factors that will potentially save lives or reduce injury when the car actually crashes. There are some things, it's very expensive to organise one of those tests and to assess a car. So ANCAP, I presume, doesn't have bottomless pockets. It can't be testing every car every year. There has to be some kind of compromise there at the moment anyway. But an assessment, a reassessment, is something that I would have thought could be done on an annual basis.
But to Byron's point, not all 5-star or 4-star or 3-star 2-1 for that matter, cars are created equal, right? So if you go into a showroom and you pick up a brochure and it says, oh, this Corolla is a 5-star car, and then you go and look at a Focus and it's 5 stars as well, they're not apples for apples. And most people aren't going to go to ANCAP's website and download the technical report and compare and go, okay, well, this one's got 98% for adult occupant protection, whereas this one's 92%.
Yeah.
But also, like, their argument for this whole system and how you tell the difference between the quality of the testing is the fact that it's all timestamped. So every ANCAP rating says ANCAP 2021. Okay, great. This is a new test. This is 5 stars. This is as good as it gets. Okay, 2016, sure, whatever. But there are very big differences in the protocol and testing standards. So a 5-star car from 2016 might only be a 2-star car in 2021. So
yes.
but no one knows that though, except people that obviously have intimate knowledge on the topic, but
It's,
most people that walk into showrooms would have no clue.
To your point, to that exact point though, Justin, I suppose to extend it further, people wouldn't really know what 5-star 2016, 5-star 2021 means. I think they're still just seeing 5 stars and thinking, that's the maximum rating.
But even more damning is half the time we get confused, and we're supposed to be the ones that are the experts. How many times I've had to search and make sure that I'm like 100% sure that, okay, this is a 2021 thing or whatever. You're always seeking clarification on those things.
I mean, forget ANCAP. I'm just permanently confused about things in general. Now, to finish off the feedback section, Grudlin74 congratulated what he's calling the apprentice tools last week. He's calling Richard Longberry's, very risque, LC300 Chesto, and cool. Tom White haven't worked out a nickname yet. I would suggest Barry or Walter. He says, great podcast. Given Oz is exposed to 60 brands, which model gems should be getting more attention in your eyes? He has a soft spot for the GWM Ute at sub 38K. It's a lot of car that provides 90% of whatever he's going to need. Your thoughts? I can lead off. I think the Alpine A110, and when we get the S version, it's going to be quite something. That car is a hidden gem. I think in terms of a small sports car, I also like the Alpha 4C, but the Alpine A110 is more refined. It's pretty much the perfect sports car in my view, and it gets no love.
I completely agree. If I could buy a sports car tomorrow, I reckon it would be an Alpine A110. It is amazing.
Byron?
Oh, same.
We're
unanimity.
Unanimity.
Yeah. Such
very
a
rare.
It's just that car is seductive in every possible sense.
What would you rather, Byron, an A110 or an MX-30 electric?
Wow.
Oh my God, you are
pushing the buttons.
Mister. You will keep.
So that's a good question, and it'd be great to get people's feedback. What do you think? What do you think is the hidden gem that is out there but no one knows about and should be doing a whole lot better? Anyway, that is where we have reached the finish line, and I want to say thank you, Byron.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
And thank you to our virtual sous chef, corporate empath, and C3PO impersonator, Mr. Pritchard, for his single-minded focus on podcast production excellence. Today, he's wearing a T-shirt saying, "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my daughter." Teletubbies pants and Gary the Snail slippers. Let us know your thoughts. You can find Cars Guide on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, please rate and review us, and make sure you subscribe to the Cars Guide YouTube channel so you can stay on top of all our latest content. Remember to look out for Cars Guide Podcast next time around. But before we go, bloke walks into a pub with a roll of bitumen under one arm, orders a beer, and the barman says, "And one for the road?"
Oh, no.
James.
I like that one.